What's up everybody, welcome back. So we're at part 10 already of the Mech multiplayer series, and in the last episode we set up the rounds and the pre-round spawning, not spawning but the countdown timer. So in this episode I want to make sure that if a player dies that the AI actually moves on to attack a second player. So I'm gonna show you what I mean by that, if I can actually die, but that shouldn't be too hard. So currently the AI will attack one player, and as soon as that player dies the AI will freeze and they will not go and attack a new enemy. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. We're going to make sure that if the AI actually kills a player, they're not going to keep shooting at the dead player, but they will move on to attacking a new player. I hope you enjoyed the series. If you do, please consider leaving a like or sharing the series with somebody else. That will greatly help the channel. And the views are a bit low on this series, so I could help use your support. If you want to get the project files for the series, just dive into my Discord and you can download all of the projects there for free. So let's dive into setting up this AI switching targets stuff. And I'm gonna warn you guys, it's going to be a little bit back and forward between separate blueprints, but I think if I do it like this, it will make a little bit more sense of what everything is doing. So I could go at the start of the episode and add all of the empty functions and then fill them in along the way. But I feel like if I go back and forward and add them at the time we need them, that it actually makes a little bit more sense of what they are doing. So it is going to go back and forward between blueprints a little bit, but I hope this way it makes a little bit more sense. So let's dive into it. The first thing we need to do if a player dies is tell the game mode that a player actually died. So we're going to use the interfaces for that. We already have a game mode interface. Let's open this one up and we're going to add a new function in here and call this one player died. And we need to give this one input, and that's the actual player. So let's call this player pawn. And then we're going to turn it into our player mech reference, so the character of the player, BP player mech. Compile and save. And we also want to create a new interface that we can add to our player character, so the actual mech. So let's create a new blueprint interface. Right click, blueprint interface. And I'm going to call this BPI player mech. We're going to open this up, and the first function that we're going to add in here is get is player alive. Alive, like so. And for this one we need one output, and that's a boolean that simply tells us if we are alive, so is alive. And that's good to go as well. So first we're going to set up these interface functions and make sure they are connected, quote unquote, to the game mode. Let's go to our player mech. So let's open the character over here. And the first thing we want to do inside of our event graph is look for the event any damage. And over here at the end we die, so we are going to go to our multicast die event. Oh, sorry, I'm messing that up. Okay, so let's restart. We're gonna go into our player mech character, and at the end of the event any damage event, where we actually call our multicast die. So over here we are server side, so we can access our game mode. We want to do it in here. So we're gonna say if our health is 0, we're gonna tell the game mode a player died. So we're gonna right click and we're gonna get the game mode. And because we are server side over here in this event, because this only runs on server, we can simply access the game mode, and we're going to use our interface function player died. So we want to hook that up over here and then make sure that the player pawn is a reference to ourself, because this is the actual character that died. So that's good to go, and then we want to set up the interface in here. So we're going to go to class settings and we're going to set our new interface inside here, so the BPI player mech. And then we can set our function by double clicking it and we simply want to know if our health is greater than 0. So we're going to grab our health variable and then do greater than and hook it up to the return node, so we know if this player is still alive or not. So that's all we need to do inside here, and now we can go to our actual game mode. So let's go to the BattleMechs game mode, and in here we're going to set up the interface function that we just created as well. So for the interfaces we have our player died function. Let's double click it. And what we want to do in here is find the player that died inside of our array of all players. So we're going to grab the all players array and we're going to find an item, plug in our player pawn over here. So now we know the index of the player in this array, and that will correspond with the index inside of our player AI count array, for example, because we keep those arrays in sync. So now the first thing we need to do is check if we are playing a multiplayer game. So hook up our isMP game boolean. If this is true, then we are actually using this array over here to keep track of how many AIs are attacking a player. And we want to make sure, because over here where we find an AI spawner, we're spawning the AI at the location of the player that has the least AI attacking him at the point. So long story short, if we spawn a new AI, we're spawning it close to the player that has the least AI attacking him. So we want to make sure that we set this value inside of the player AI count to a very high number, so it will not be picked again over here inside the find AI spawner. So we're going to grab the array and we're going to set an array element. Plug this one into the true pin because we're only using this array in multiplayer games. And then we're going to set the item to 9,999. So we're not going to have this much AI in the game ever. So if we set it to a number like this, we will make sure it will never get picked again inside of the find AI spawner array. And the index is coming from the find node. So that's the index of the player that died. So this sets up the spawning part. Then we want to grab all of our players array, and in here we're also going to set an array element, and we simply want to make sure that the index of the player that died is no longer valid anymore. So we're going to grab the index over here again, plug it in, and simply set it to an empty reference. So we're not going to connect anything up here to make sure that the player that died is not valid anymore inside of this array. And we do want to do this in both cases. So if we're playing multiplayer or if we are playing single player. So that's where we're going to hook up the false pin as well. So that's all we need to do for now inside of our player died event. And then we actually need to make sure that we have a way to tell the AI what player it needs to attack next, and also correspond that back to the AI. So we're going to use the interfaces again. So let's get rid of this, and we're going to go back to our interfaces, and for the game mode interface, open it up, and we're going to add a function called get new player to attack. And we probably want some inputs in here. So we want the input of the AI pawn. So let's add one input. Thank you. That's AI pawn. And we are simply going to pass it on as an actor. So we're not going to cast it to any specific class. That's fine. And then we also want an interface we can add to our actual AI. So we're going to right click, create a new interface, and call this BPI enemy. And inside of this interface, we're going to add a new function that is called set new player to attack. And I'm going to grab my example quickly. So create a new function in here called set new player to attack. And for this, we need 3 inputs. The first one is the player to attack. And we're simply going to pass that on as an actor again. So you give it an actor reference. Then we want the player to attack index because we also are using the indexes. So player to attack index. This is an integer. And the last thing we need is a boolean that tells us if the game is over. So we're going to say all players died and turn this into a bool. Compile and save. And we're going to implement this a little bit later. First of all, let's go to our GameMode again. And we're going to implement the new function that we added in this interface, the GameMode interface. So let's open our GameMode backup. And in here, first of all, we want to create a function where we can check if the game is over or not. So we're going to create a new function and call this check is game over. And I'm going to grab my example here quickly. So what we're going to do in here is grab all of our players. So that's the BP player mech. And in here, if a player is dead, we actually set this to an invalid reference. So what we can simply do is grab a for each loop and check if the index is valid. And if it's valid, then the player is still alive. If it's not valid, the player is dead. So we can use a local variable for this and call this something like local num players alive. Turn it into an integer. And we can simply increment it if we hook it up to the valid pin. So then we can go to the completed pin. We're going to add a return node. And we're going to say the game is over. So we're going to add an output, game over. And the game is over if the local num players alive equals 0. So we're going to do is equal and plug that into the return node. So we know how many players are alive and if the game is over or not. So we can compile this one and then we can go back to the event graph. And in here we are going to go to add our new interface event. So that's called get new player to attack. And I'm actually going to create a function to make this a little bit more neatly laid out. So we're going to create a second function in here and that's called find new player to attack. And we want to give this one input and that's the AI pawn. So that's the reference that we passed on in the interface function. So AI pawn, and that was an actor reference. So simply change it to an actor. So in the event graph, we can hook this up. Find new player to attack over here and pass on the AI pawn. And then inside of this function, we're going to look for the new player to attack. So first of all, we're going to check if the game is over or not. Because if it is, then we don't have any players to attack. So that will make our lives a whole lot easier. So let's hook up a branch over here. Plug that one into the condition. And if this is true, then we can simply call our set new player to attack on the AI pawn. So we're going to grab the AI pawn from the input and we're going to call our set new player to attack. So that's the interface function that we just created for the AI. So let's hook that up to the true pin. No, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. And then we can also grab the outcome over here and hook that up to the all players died. So if the game is over, that's true, then all players died. And we're going to create local variables for these ones. So we're going to drag off the player to attack, promote to local variable, and this is the local player to attack. And do the same thing for the attack index. So promote to local variable, and this is local player to attack index. That's good to go. So now we can go to the false pin over here. If we actually want to select a new enemy. So first of all, let's check if this is a multiplayer game. Hook it up. And if this is true, then we need to select an enemy. If this is false, then we can simply say local player to attack index 0. although that should probably not happen because if we have a single player game, then all of the players died by the time we call this function. But whatever, this will make sure that we don't get any errors and empty variables, so that should work fine. Then if we want to select a new target in a multiplayer game, we're going to use our minimum of int array function again. So we're going to grab the player AI count array, and from here we're going to do min of int array. So these are the amount of AI that are currently attacking a player. So for example, player 0 has 3 AI attacking him, player 1 has 5 AI attacking him. Then this will grab the lowest value, and we're going to make sure that the AI picks the player that has the least amount of AI attacking him. So we can grab the index of min value, and that's going to be the next player to attack. Then we need to increment this array because we are telling this AI to attack a new player. So we're going to grab our player AI count array. We're going to get a reference, player AI count array. So this one, we're going to get a reference. So not a copy, but a reference. And we're going to get the reference of the player to attack index. And we're going to increment that by 1. So those values will match up again. And then we're going to grab our local player to attack setter, and we can hook that up to both of the branches, like so. And the local player to attack is coming from the all players array. We're going to get a copy of the local player to attack index, and then set that over here. So now we can hook this up to our return node, or that's not actually a return node, but this is the node that will call the event on the AI to set the new target and the target index. So this will make sure that we select a new player and then also update our player AI count array so it still matches the correct values. That's good to go. Now we want to go inside of our enemy base to set up that interface. So open our enemy base blueprint, and I'm going to grab my note again, so give me a second. In here, first thing we need to do is add the new interface that we created. So let's go to the class settings, inherited interfaces, and add our BPI enemy. Then we want to make sure, so this event set new player to attack, let me double check it. We're going to add it in a second. First of all, we want to add a new variable in here, and that's a boolean called stop movement loop. And then first thing we're going to do is go to our distance to target function. So this is the function that actually runs on a timer, so sort of on tick. And we want to make sure that in here we make sure that if the player is not valid, that we are actually picking a new player. So what we're gonna do in here, let's make sure we add a little bit of room in here. So first of all, the player to attack that is currently set, we want to double check if that player is still alive. So we're going to disconnect the isValid pin, and in here we're going to drag off the player to attack again, and we're going to use the interface function. So get isPlayerAlive, the message function, plug that into the isValid pin. If this is true, so let's hook up a branch and hook up the isAlive condition. If that's true, then we can simply continue. So we're going to plug it back into the branch, and we're going to keep running the function like we did before. If this is false, then we need to select a new target. So then first we're going to pause this timer that actually runs this function. So we're going to drag off here and do pause timer by function name. And then the function name is the distance to target function. So let's copy and paste that in here. Then we want to set our canAttack boolean to false. So let's move that down here a little bit. So we're going to drag in canAttack and set it to false. This will make sure that our attack loop is paused. we're going to grab our character movement component and we're going to say stop movement immediately. Plug that in over here as well. And then we're going to grab our game mode actor. So we have that in the references. And from here, we're going to say get new player to attack. Plug it in. And the AI pawn is a reference to ourselves. Hook it up like this. So this will make sure that if the player that we were attacking is dead, then we're going to call the game mode and ask for a new player to attack. And to make sure that this is also working if the player is already removed from the array, we're going to grab our not valid pin and also hook that up to the pause timer by function name. So that should make everything work again. So in that case, we don't need to check if the player is alive because it's not even valid anymore. So that won't work. That's good to go. Then we want to go to our event graph. And over here, we have our movement loop. And in there, we want to make sure, so inside of this distance to target function, we call our stop movement immediately. And that will make sure that inside of our movement loop, this will go to aborted. So it will abort the move order. And after that, we want to grab our movement loop and make sure that we actually stop looping this if we don't want to keep moving. So does that make sense? No. But what we're going to do is we're going to grab a branch over here. And we actually want to hook it up right before here. So let's disconnect this, plug it over here. And we're going to simply check if we want to keep moving. And if this is true, then we're going to go back to our delay here. If this is false, we're going to break out of the loop and we're going to stop this function or event. So that's good to go, and then we need to grab our set new player to attack event from the interface, and we want to set this one up. So this will be called by the game mode to assign a new player to attack. So first of all, we're going to check if the game is over, so all players died. If that's true, then we can simply clear our distance to target timer function because we don't need it anymore. So we're going to say clear timer by function name. And again, we're going to clear our distance to target timer. And in that case, we want to grab our movement loop and stop it. So we're going to stop movement loop and then enable it. And if this is false, then we simply want to set a new player to attack. So we have that inside of our variables. We can hook it up to the event over here and do the same thing for the player to attack index. That's also inside of our variables, and hook it up to the event. After we set those, we want to make sure that we set the focus of this AI again. So we need to get the AI controller. Get AI controller. The controlled actor is a reference to ourselves. And then for the AI controller, we want to do set focus. And the new focus is going to be our new player to attack. So we can hook that up over here. And then we want to unpass the timer because we passed it previously inside of our distance to target function. So we're going to say unpass timer by function name. And this time again, we're going to unpass the distance to target time. So that will make sure that this function will start running again and we will start moving towards our new target and start attacking him if we are close. So that should pretty much work. So if we compile and save, let's make sure that everything is saved in the case of a horrible crash. And then we can test this in a 2-player game. So let's see what happens. So we want to make sure that one of the players dies and then the AI should move on to the next player to start attacking that one. So I'm going to use the 1 key on my keyboard to keep one player alive and simply add health, and then we can see if this is working. It's not actually working. So that's cool. Let me double check and see what I missed. Okay, that was my bad. It's not too big of a mistake. Well, it is a big mistake, but it's not hard to fix. So inside of the movement loop, where we check if we want to stop the movement loop, if this is false, we want to keep moving. If this is true, then we want to break out of the loop. So I hooked up the continue with the execution to the wrong pin. You want to make sure if it's false, we're going to go back to the delay. If it's true, we're not going to connect anything, so we're going to break out of this loop. And now this should actually work. So now if we hit play again, and we wait till one of the players dies, then the AI will start moving on to the other player. And it's actually running very laggy at this moment, so bear with me. So that player dies, and now all of the AI will move on to the last remaining player instead of just being stuck on the battlefield. So that's working. Cool. That wasn't too bad. I thought it would be a longer episode, but we already got it out of the way. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please consider leaving a like. In the next episode, we're going to make sure that we can walk over enemies, so they're not able to block our pathing, and we are not able to get stuck on enemies, so we can simply walk over them to kill them. After that, we're going to add health pickups, and then we are close to doing all the UI stuff. Cool, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider leaving a like. Talk to you later. Bye bye.